Chapter 141, Worshipping the Oracle. Han Shuo's arrival resulted in a round of cheering from the forest trolls. The old priest trembled and knelt on the ground, crying out with hot tears in his eyes. The mighty Datara and Liaison Yu finally returned. Taking in the sights around him, the Han Shuo felt odd emotions in his heart. Logically speaking, these forest trolls were the greediest of robbers. Han Shuo should have had a distaste for them, but when he saw the forest trolls treat him like an oracle from the gods and listen to all his commands, Han Shuo suddenly felt that they weren't that evil. Raiding and looting was this race's innate nature. Their actions were acceptable according to the rules of survival in the dark forest. Just like how some of the larger magical creatures would naturally hunt some of the lower level magical creatures, this was what the forest trolls did as well. As he looked out over them, all the forest trolls, whether elderly or young, were all looking him with great expectation and yearning. It was the most pious and reverent sort of faith a religious follower would have that was present in their eyes. It was as if one of his commands would cause them to rush headlong into death without a second thought. This kind of feeling made Han Shuo feel a bit odd. "Don't worry, your mighty Dachi would never abandon you." After surveying the surroundings, Han Shuo opened his mouth gravely after remaining silent for a moment. The old priest translated this sentence in a shout of celebration as hot tears filled his eyes. All the forest trolls raised up empty pockets and cheered loudly, as if a guarantee from Han Shuo was enough for them to forget their current difficult straits. Han Shuo took out hempsack after hempsack of rations from the space ring, piling them on the stone floor that had been cleared of snow. All sorts of thick blankets and daily necessities filled the space in front of the forest trolls, dazzling their eyes. This caused the forest trolls suffering through the harshness of winter to all caper with joy. These items were prepared for you to make it through this winter. The several warehouses full of rations are enough for you to smoothly make it through this winter without having to go out and raid. The mighty Datra made this trip in order to ready these items for his people. Han Shuo's low voice carried out smoothly over the forest trolls' village. As the old priest led the way with tears of gratitude bursting from him, all the forest trolls knelt in homage. The old priest then gave orders, and the chief of the forest trolls led the way in lifting up the rations and daily necessities, storing them in a cave towards the back of the village. Han Shuo followed behind the old priest and arrived at the newly redecorated temple within the village. Not only had a small sculpture of the little skeleton been erected, but there was even one of Han Shuo. This made Han Shuo feel even more odd, as if he'd unknowingly truly become their protector. "When I arrived just now, I saw the traces of battle outside the village. Did those annoying elves start a war again?" After he walked in with the small skeleton, he gave an order and the little skeleton flopped down into the head seat. Han Shuo sat down next to the little skeleton and looked at the old priest with inquiry. In response to the oracle, it was indeed those pesky elves who have once again come to start a war. "But be at peace, Oracle, your brave people will never allow the elves to win. Beneath the splendor of the mighty Datra, the elves will surely retreat in great defeat again." Light shone from the old priest's face as he spoke with great confidence. Waving his hand, Han Shuo halted the old priest's continued boasting and thought for a bit before instructing, "The rations and daily necessities that I've brought should be enough to last all of you the entire winter. If any more merchants want to trade for the weird items in your possession, you can trade with them. In addition, don't go out raiding this winter without my instructions. If we're going to rob anyone, we'll do a big heist and none of those small jobs. The mighty Datra will inform you when he's found a suitable target. You don't need to worry that you'll have nothing to do." "How many did the elves bring this time, and when did you start fighting? Tell me all the details." The old priest didn't ask why after receiving Han Shuo's instructions and agreed to his request. He immediately told the forest troll warrior beside him to convey Han Shuo's 2 points to the chief. The old priest then thoroughly detailed the entire battle with the elves to Han Shuo. From the old priest's explanation, Han Shuo understood that the elves would always have a big battle with the forest trolls every winter. This was because it was only then that the forest trolls were likely to be short on rations, daily necessities and weapons, and this was when the forest trolls' fighting strength was at their weakest. The elves had followed the same actions as last year and taken advantage of the fact that the forest trolls couldn't raid in winter to make an attack. However, their numbers weren't as great as the forest trolls, and thus, They couldn't occupy it absolute advantage. They'd only just made a feint when they retreated to discuss next steps again. From the old priest Han Shao knew that the forest trolls had many large and small tribes within the dark forest. Because this tribe had the duty of protecting the mighty Data's sacred ground and the fact that it had around 500 forest troll warriors, the old priest's tribe had a certain authority over the other forest troll tribes in the dark forest. Because of the little skeleton and Han Shao's appearance, the old priest had used their name to issue an order and command all the forest trolls scattered throughout the forest to gather, intent on giving the elves a painful lesson. Because the mighty Datra was the god of the forest trolls, the impact of the little skeleton's appearance was immeasurable. More than 300 forest troll warriors from 4 small tribes had rushed over in 10 days, wanting to bask in the little skeleton's presence. According to the old priest, the forest trolls from various tribes within the dark forest would gather together within a short period of time. By that time, not only would the elves' attack not have the anticipated effect, but rather they would even suffer heavy losses. Han Shao had been worried that the elves would kill a great number of forest trolls, but hadn't thought that because of the little skeleton's charisma, forest trolls that had been scattered throughout the dark forest, who normally had no relation with each other, were all rushing here as if for a pilgrimage. From the old priest's word, Han Shao understood that when all the forest trolls gathered, they would number more than 2,000. As for the elves within the dark forest, there seemed to be only a few hundred of them. Although they had a few divine archers and mages, it was very possible that they would suffer such a thorough setback that they'd lose the shirt off their own backs. Rubbing his head, Han Shao had a bit of a headache. He thought for a moment and then opened his mouth. It looks like it should be the elves who should be worried this time. It's said that the elves are very rich. I think we should rob them all. The liaison's meaning is? The old priest started and asked, perplexed. Do you know where the elves live within the dark forest? Han Shao thought for a bit and then asked. The old priest was stunned and then thought with a furrowed brow before finally saying, we're aware of the general location but have never been inside. Nodding, Han Shao smiled. Alright then, when the forest trolls from the other tribes arrive, have them stay and keep the elves in check. Our tribe can travel to where the elves live and make use of this time to rob their homes. But liaison, why don't we stay and meet up with the brothers from other tribes and kill all of the elves' warriors? These elves are truly wicked. They always make mischief and sabotage our operations. They also fight with us every winter and have killed many of our tribe over the years. The old priest blinked momentarily and asked in confusion, not blindly following Han Shao's suggestions for the first time. The nature of us forest trolls is raiding and not killing. In addition, the elves within the dark forest aren't the whole of their tribe. If we kill all the elves here, it will bring further trouble for us. There's no need for that. To Han Shao, there really was no point in having the forest trolls and elves fight each other to the death. In addition, he didn't actually want all the elves to be killed. What he needed now was wealth. He needed large amounts of gold coins to support his demonic magic and practice of magic. This was why he made this suggestion. Although he still didn't fully understand, the old priest didn't continue his questioning. After a few more days in which more forest trolls gathered from all areas, Honshu and the little skeleton received a tsunami of cheers and pious worship before leaving a portion of the forest trolls behind to contend with the elves. Han Shao, the little skeleton, and the 500 forest troll warriors from the old priest's tribe left to visit the elves' village. On this chilly winter day, the 500 forest troll warriors brought with them sufficient rations, thick blankets, and sharp weapons as they made for the deeper reaches of the dark forest. Chapter 142. The suggestion to slaughter the dragon. Winter had arrived. The chilly wind howled ferociously as large snowflakes floated through the air like goose down, causing even the long-term residents of the dark forest, the forest trolls, to shiver with cold and feel frostbitten. It was a good thing that Han Shao had brought enough rations and thick clothes upon visiting this time, otherwise this cruel winter would have been a disaster for the forest trolls. Han Shao and the forest trolls ventured deeper into the dark forest over the next couple of days. Their progression this time didn't take them directly into the depths towards the south. They veered towards the west from the very beginning. Over the past couple of days, Han Shao also had the forest trolls craft a crude carriage for himself, and he silently practiced the art of the mnemonic ninth heavens. This art needed to infuse the meridians of the hands and legs with magical yuan and then circulate magical yuan according to a particular circulation route before being able to fly through the air. After experiencing the foundation foundational training of the solid realm opened passages and molded spirit realms. Now that he'd reached the true demon realm, Han Shao-O's speed in practicing the art of the mnemonic ninth heavens was much faster than when he'd initially trained in the glacial mystical spell fire. Because the meridians had already been opened and reinforced, Han Shao didn't feel the slightest bit of obstruction as he circulated his magical yuan according to the art of the mnemonic ninth heavens. Over the last few days, Han Shao didn't continue to remain within the carriage. He came up with random excuses and secretly tried to fly through the air with the art of the mnemonic ninth heavens. Once he understood how to deploy it, a bit of practice and mastering its knacks was still needed in order to truly fly. Han Shao tried many times and could only hover. Because he still wasn't adept at controlling direction, he fell from high heights multiple times. On this particular day, the blizzard stopped its ravaging of the land. The forest trolls also stopped in front of a mountain valley. Han Shao was in the back, still attempting to quickly master the art of the mnemonic ninth heavens. When he discovered that the forest trolls suddenly stopped, he immediately stopped practicing and quickly rushed to the front from the back. Liaison: the mountain valley ahead should be where the elves live. Two of our children saw a large amount of elves appear near this area a long time ago. When Han Shao walked to the old priest, he pointed at the snow-covered mountain valley and explained respectfully to Han Shao. He took a deep breath in and narrowed his eyes, looking into the distance. It was a pity that due to the cover of the accumulated snow, the trees and ground were all covered, and thus, Han Shao couldn't actually make out anything in the distance. A string of mysterious incantation chanted out lowly from Han Shao's mouth as an oily green ring of light flew out in front of him, making for the snow-covered mountain valley. Life reconnaissance was a journeyman magic of the necromancy major, and something that Han Shao had just started to grasp recently. Life reconnaissance had no use in attacking. It was, as its name indicated, a spell that probed for life. It was useful in unfamiliar environments and unknown surroundings. Han Shao narrowed his eyes to sense things. As soon as this magic had been deployed, he didn't sense any traces of life wherever the life reconnaissance spell flew over. When the magic had circled the mountain valley, it vanished without a trace due to a lack of mental strength. There are no signs of life within the mountain valley. However, we can still take a look. If the elves do live here, they must have left signs on the trees. It'd be best if we can discover the elves' homes here. Han Shu thought for a bit and instructed the old priest. Han Shao then took the lead with the forest troll warriors, with the hunters and priests bringing up the rear. They slowly moved alertly towards the depths of the mountain valley. As their feet creaked through the packed down snow, the forest troll warriors waved the weapons in their hands and knocked the snow off the top of the trees, kicking vigorously at the snow that had accumulated on the ground, trying to see if there were any clues. A shout of astonishment came from a young forest troll. Han Shao's ears captured this exclamation as his body flashed like lightning towards that location, but when he stood at the source of the sound, he discovered that the forest troll who had cried out had already vanished without a trace. His brow furrowing, Han Shao paid attention to the sounds of disturbance all around and then circled the accumulated snow a few times. He finally stood on top of the messy snowy ground and suddenly stomped down hard. Han Shu's body suddenly free fell with a plunk, and he landed in a pitch-black cave within the span of a breath. The startled cries of the young forest troll were still sounding from a corner not too far in the distance. It was quite ear-piercing in the pitch-black darkness of the hole. Han Shao's body had now adjusted to the darkness as his eyes rolled around, discovering that the cave he was in continued on through to some place beneath the ground. He looked carefully and discovered that the entrance to this cave was quite spacious. The ground leading downwards from the entrance was a bit messy as there were many traces of footprints. Could it be that the elves who worshipped the goodness of nature and loved the forest all lived underground? Han Shao was a bit confused. He activated the art of the mnemonic ninth heavens after looking around dumbfounded for a bit. His body slowly floated upwards and he punched upwards where he'd landed through the ground, destroying the snow covering overhead. The forest troll who had accidentally fallen down just now had only slowly grown accustomed to the darkness after flailing around in surprise for a bit. He felt his way around and slowly climbed out as well. A weird whistling sound suddenly traveled from the depths of the ground. Han Shao gave a start of surprise as he once again released the life reconnaissance magic and aimed it towards the source of the sounds from the depths. When the life reconnaissance magic was released, Han Shao discovered immense traces of life and gave a great start of fright. He abruptly rushed out from the cave cave threw his head back and whistled sharply. When the old priest heard Han Shao-O's cry, he came searching for Han Shao from a far distance away. The forest troll who'd fallen down had also crawled out at this point. The forest troll warriors who were observing the situation in the surroundings all rushed over with their weapons, shoveling the snow away from the cave and revealing a deep cave that could contain 3 or 4 people walking abreast. Several arrows whistled fiercely as they were shot from the mouth of the cave, scaring the forest trolls who had stuck their heads out to take a look. The old priest's face grew angry and was about to give the order to attack the creatures within the cave, but Han Shao reached out a hand and stopped him. The elves greatly loved nature and naturally wouldn't live in such a dark and gloomy place. Han Shao understood this, and thus, he hadn't had the forest trolls immediately make a move. Several figures shot out from the mouth of the cave with a whoosh. Their sharp ears, handsome and beauty features were the unique trademarks of the elves, but these elves had black or darkly purpled colored skin and white hair, appearing all the more different. "It's the dark elves!" the old priest immediately exclaimed when he saw these strange elves appear. Han Shao finally reacted after the old priest's cry. This tribe was also made up of elves, but they'd forsaken peace, nature, and worship of the goddess of nature. They worshipped the queen of the night rose instead. Living in the gloomy underground world for a long period of time had caused their skin to turn black and dark purple. Their natures were evil as they burned and looted everywhere. Their society was a matriarchal one, as females were mainly in positions of power. Within the underground world they were like the forest trolls, an evil race full of villainy. After the first couple of dark elves dashed out, even more of them slowly poured out. When they appeared, they first guarded the entrance to the cave as they stared in an unfriendly fashion at Han Shao and the forest trolls, grasping weapons in their hands. Han Shao waved his hands and indicated for the old priest to not make any moves at the moment and for everyone to slowly back up and spread out behind them. However, he also had everyone brandish their weapons against the dark elves in case they suddenly made a move. The beautiful female dark elves wore revealing outfits displaying tantalizing bodies from all of them. Although it was the winter season, they still didn't seem to be willing to cover the skin on their bodies. Although the dark purple skin was bizarre, it had another sort of enthralling allure. After a while, a beautiful dark elf noblewoman who looked quite stately and opulent walked out from the cave. She was wearing a soft leather jacket and was subtly revealing her beautiful legs with a fey air about her. When the beautiful dark elf madam walked out from within the cave, she looked askance at the forest trolls and the surroundings and gave a coy laugh. She asked in the common tongue, "So it's our brave forest troll friends. What are you doing here?" The old priest also knew that they'd come looking for the wrong people at this time. As the sage of the forest trolls, the old priest's experience was also quite broad. He naturally understood that the dark elves also weren't those of the light. He snorted lightly and responded, "Our children recently discovered the traces of a large group of elves. Because us forest trolls hold deep hatred for the elves, we've come to destroy them." The fey beautiful madam had a much friendlier attitude after his words had been spoken. She nodded. "We also have a deep grudge with those who live on the ground. They enter the underground world every now and then to attack us. The large numbers of elves you discovered must have come to do battle with us. We've long since heard the brave ferocity of your forest troll tribe on the ground. It looks like we have a common enemy." The old priest was silent for a bit after she'd spoke and turned to ask Han Shao respectfully, "Liaison, what should we do now?" Han Shao actually wanted to rob the dark elves, but he didn't know just how many they had in numbers or how strong their fighting capabilities were. Thus, he weighed things up privately. The fey dark elf madam was very surprised by the old priest's inquiry toward Han Shao. Although he wore a dark robe and had covered his entire body, his body was noticeably smaller than the forest trolls, and it was obvious that he was of a different race. It naturally made the beautiful woman quite surprised to see the old priest's respectful attitude. "Brave friend, our family is facing the attacks from a dark dragon at the moment. If you're willing to help us, we can offer you a cartload of gold and a cartload of jewels in thanks. If you can kill the dark dragon, everything on it will belong to you." The dark elf madam suddenly spoke up when she saw Han Shao stand there without a word. Han Shao started. He hadn't expected that these dark elves would be facing the attacks of a dark dragon right now. Dark dragons were evil dragons and also liked to live beneath the surface. The dark elves were truly unlucky to run into a dark dragon. Frowning, Han Shao thought for a bit and felt that this dark elf's suggestion was a bit tempting. Although the dark dragon was likely incredibly strong, but the combination of this group of dark elves and 500 forest trolls, there should be a chance to kill him. There was extraordinary treasure on each dragon that would cause anyone to tremble. Therefore the rewards in killing a dragon was a temptation that many couldn't resist. Let's go see the underground world first. If the addition of us means we can handle that dark dragon, we'll agree to your proposal. Han Shao thought for a moment and opened his mouth to say, I can promise that with the aid of your 500 brave forest troll friends, that dark dragon is dead without a doubt. My name is Dana. You are welcome to join us in the underground world. The dark elf madam said happily, and then gave a word of instruction to the dark elves. The dark elves, who had just rushed out of the Ave, once again re-entered the cave under Dana's orders. Dana lifted her buttocks and walked in the very end, waving a hand at Han Shao and the old priest. Following behind them meant that they could back out if anything went south. Therefore when he saw that the dark elves went down first and Dana had stayed behind to look after them, Han Shao felt that there should be no danger, and he nodded at the old priest. Han Shao and the old priest was in front. The carriage holding the little skeleton was in the center. 500 forest trolls filtered in through the cave and started walking down into the underground world that the dark elves lived in. The further they walked, the more spacious the cave became. There were even some red-brown rocks growing down in the depths, sending out a faint light and making so that it wasn't so dark inside. Chapter 143, Everyone with their own plans. The group walked downwards for quite a long period of time, with Han Shao discovered that the cave was becoming wider and wider. All sorts of complex paths led in all directions. At this time Han Shao concentrated and his eyes took in the surroundings, remembering the way they had come in from in order to prevent them from being unable to find their way back. When their footsteps downwards slowed down and Dana led Han Shao and the others to walk on flat ground, Han Shao lifted his head to look up and discovered that those red-brown glowing rocks were hung high overhead, appearing like the sunset that would appear on the ground. As he looked out, he noticed that apart from the red-brown rocks covering the skies overhead, the sights all around weren't that much different from the world above. It just wasn't as cold as the outside world and seemed to even be a bit warmer. Those who live below the ground also include gnomes and lizardmen, as well as super creatures like the dark dragon. Apart from us dark elves, although the world below and the world above are a bit different, it's not that much so. When Dana saw Han Shao and the old priest look in all directions with great interest, she beamed and explained. Her mesmerizing eyes seemed to look at Han Shao with great expression. The dark elves were naturally lascivious, and their female elves even more so. As the matriarch of the dark elves, Dana was naturally no exception. Han Shao only needed to take one look at her glance to understand the meaning within it. Why is the dark dragon attacking your tribe? Where does he live? Han Shao didn't pay any attention to Dana's attention as he frowned and asked her about important matters. We originally didn't have much conflict with this dark dragon, just that the lizardmen seem to use some methods to bribe it into attacking us. This is because our tribe has been fighting the lizardmen for a fertile piece of land recently. We've engaged in several battles and the lizardmen turned up with this dark dragon after they were defeated. Dana was a bit glum and anxious when Han Shao brought up this matter and spoke with a sigh. How many people did you send out to battle the dark dragon? What kind of attacks does it use? Will we be of any effect if we join you? Han Shao continued to ask. Our tribe has more than 300 dark elf warriors who have already engaged this dark dragon in combat. Its body is incredibly durable, with only its head and neck being slightly weaker. It can spit out a dragon breath attack that will eat away at flesh. It can also spew out a hot flame that has lava mixed in. We used magic and arrows to attack it from afar and lost more than 20 dark elves during this time, but we also successfully harmed it. It's now hiding in the swamp licking his wounds. If we add your 500 forest troll warriors, I am certain that we can kill it. Dana answered confidently. Han Shao didn't open his mouth again. Many dark elves continuously gathered along the way. When they finally arrived at swamp with deeply dark sludge, the original 10 dark elves had turned into more than 300. Give us our payment first. We we've decided to help you. Han Shao thought for a bit and suddenly said with a low voice. Dana was quite forthright as she nodded with a smile. A few male dark elves in the distance pushed 2 carts to Han Shao. They lifted the gray cloth covering the cart to reveal the gleaming cart of gold and a sparkling cart of jewels. Han Shao's eyes lit up as he looked silently at the payment, appraising it privately. He was sure that this cart of gold and jewels was worth at least tens of thousands of gold coins. To think that these dark elves were actually quite rich. Han Shao weighed things up privately and walked to the cart of gold and jewels, using the space ring to unceremoniously put the contents of the 2 carts away. As he did this, Han Shao covertly observed Dana's reaction. From her eyes, Han Shao suddenly detected a hint of coldness and disdain. After ascending to the true demon realm, not only Han Shao's 5 senses but even his perceptions felt all the more mystical. He could miraculously detect many fine details, just like the expression that had just flashed through Dana's eyes. Han Shao hadn't even purposefully paid attention to it, but still magically grasped this detail unconsciously. A thought striking him, Han Shao maintained his bent over posture and put away the items in the 2 carts. He silently debated the meaning of the coldness and disdain in Dana's eyes. A few more traces of wariness appeared in his heart as he began to secretly plot some things. Alright, I've accepted the items, what now? Han Shao lifted his head and kept an eye on the swamp as he spoke to Dana. Our tribe doesn't have any strong warriors and only has archers and mages to engage in long distance attacks. I think we should have your forest troll warriors lead the charge later, with our dark elves using arrows and magic to attack from behind. Dana spoke matter-of-factly. Shaking his head, Han Shao turned her down decisively. No, the dark dragon also has a strong body. Our people will be going to our deaths if we take the lead. If you insist on doing this, then we can't continue this business deal. If the forest trolls led the charge, they would face a dark dragon of unknown strength in front and the coldly scheming dark elves behind. Facing danger in this way would subject the forest trolls to danger from both sides, placing them in an exceedingly disadvantageous situation. Even if Han Shao hadn't discovered Dana's plotting, he would have never agreed to this suggestion. Not to mention that Han Shao now felt that Dana had other plans. He naturally wouldn't allow such conditions to form. Dana's smiling face darkened when Han Shao turned her down, and she then looked at Han Shao with some anger. Someone has to be in front at least. Do you want my weak tribeswoman to go to their deaths? We've paid you 2 carts of gold and jewels. Don't worry, we just want cannon fodder, don't we? Leave it to me. As long as you can lure the dark dragon out, I can take care of the cannon fodder. Will this do? Han Shao's voice had also descended as he responded. When Han Shao's words finishing ringing out, he chanted a magical incantation and a zombie warrior appeared out of thin air. Han Shao continued chanting as more zombie warriors and skeletal warriors appeared, including a few ghouls as well. They formed a meat shield in front of Dana. So you're a necromancer? Dana nodded, but her gaze at Han Shao had turned slightly contemptuous because he had only summoned zombie and skeletal warriors. He paid no heed to her look and said, well, can you make your moves now? Yes, I'll go make arrangements and lure that dark dragon so it leaves the swamp immediately. You'll have to immediately send your summoned creatures forward and have your forest trolls attack with us from the distance. We can't give the dark dragon any breathing space or chance to talk, otherwise we'll be in grave trouble. Dana nodded and then backed up to where the dark elves were. They chatted quietly in an exceedingly low voice as they looked in Han Shu's direction. It was at this moment that Han Shao's extraordinary ears proved their use. He could clearly hear Dana's conversation after he concentrated. When he discovered that Dana's words were discussing on how to handle the forest trolls, he couldn't help but continuously laugh coldly. He waved the old priest over and bent his head to the old priest, giving a few instructions in a low voice. The old priest was first greatly startled and then recollected his wits. He listened carefully to Han Shao's words and then walked off to give some order to the forest troll chief, having him act in accordance to Han Shao's words. A young female dark elf walked naked to the swamp, singing out with a clear voice as she walked. Her naked curves was tantalizing as her dark purple skin glistened and gleamed. Her buttocks from the back were full and pert, her spine smooth and alluring. She was full of a fey beauty. The pure desolate song emitted from her mouth, making even Han Shao's heart caper and his mind race. When she walked to the end of the swamp, her cute feet sank into the soft pitch black sludge as she cutely kicked and it created not a small bit of sound. The peaceful swamp suddenly sank in on itself, forming a huge whirlpool. The whirlpool sucked in all the sludge around it as the naked dark elf girl gave a start of surprise, evading it a bit frantically and dodging the pull of the whirlpool. The whirlpool had been in the center when it slowly changed position, quickly moving to the little girl. Just as it was about to reach the end of the swamp, a huge wave of sound erupted from the whirlpool as an inky black dark dragon stuck its head out. Its red eyes were like two lanterns. When its spine and sharp claws were also revealed, its body extended to tens of meters beyond into the swamp. Its body shape is huge, making Han Shao flabbergasted, as it was his first time seeing a dragon this close. "Little wench, come play with me, don't run away." The dark dragon was full of lascivious teasing after it had emerged. It shook its enormous body as it chased after the dark elf girl. Chapter 144. A step ahead. Han Shao cursed under his breath and gave an order. The dark creatures he just summoned walked out from the cover on either side and looked at the dark elves, ready to make a move against the dark elves along with the dark dragon. "Come on, come on." The dark dragon leered as its over 10-meter long body took flight with a thunderous rumble, sending sludge flying every which way in the swamp. The naked dark elf girl had panic written all over her face as she desperately ran towards where Han Shao and Dana were hiding. Her lofty melons swayed in tantalizing ripples as her slender legs furiously churned. Her allure only increased as mud adorned her lithe body. When the dark elf girl finally made it to the zone that Han Shao and the others had erected, Han Shao gave an order to the dark creatures. More than 10 zombie and skeletal warriors as well as a few ghouls broke out from concealment and brazenly charged towards that lustful dark dragon. Han Shao called out at the same time, and the forest trolls readied their weapons, aiming for the dark dragon trying to rise into the sky. The forest troll hunters threw out sharp spears and javelins. In the same breath, the dark elves covered the sky with a shower of arrows and dark elf magic. "Damn it, it's you lowly races again!" the dark dragon bellowed as he opened his mouth and shot out an awe-inspiring jet of flame with bits of lava mixed in. "Stand back and evade!" Han Shao roared out as the forest trolls quickly hid towards the back, when the old priest shouted out as well. The jet of flame seared where they just stood, setting fire to the dry weeds and grass that littered their surroundings. Attacks from all sorts of spears and javelins as well as arrows and magic from the dark elves landed on the dark dragon's durable body. They had no effect at all. The ones aimed at the dark dragon's neck, eyes and head were all sent flying in another direction with a wave of the dark dragon's claws. The dark dragon's enormous body soared through the air as it arrived above Han Shao's summoned zombie and skeletal warriors. Its metal claws suddenly swiped downwards, crushing the skeletal warriors into bone fragments. The zombie warriors fared no better, their bodies falling to pieces with another swipe. They were indeed only good as cannon fodder. The strength of the dark dragon was within Han Shao's expectations. He didn't feel pained when he saw the dark creatures disappear into shards and fragments beneath the dark dragon's attacks. He sent a significant look at the old priest from afar. The dark elves continued attacking as their archers with magic bows in the back started shooting icicle-like arrows. In addition, they also started using explosive arrows, which caused a huge disturbance and enraged the dragon even more. "You lowly pathetic lives will all die before the anger of I the wondrous Gilbert." The dark dragon Gilbert roared furiously and continued flying forward in the face of icicle and exploding arrows. As he flew close to the ground and churned the ground with his claws, it finished off the rest of the dark creatures that Han Shao had summoned. The dark elves, according to orders received from Matriarch Dana, all swiftly dodged to the back after firing their attacks, attempting to continue handling the dark dragon from behind the forest trolls. It was a pity that Han Shao had long since given his instructions that whenever the dark elves started moving, all the forest trolls should even forget attacking the dark dragons and race backwards and retreat with all due haste. They were even faster than the dark elves in escaping to the back. "Bring down the stone wall!" Han Shao roared furiously in the midst of the forest trolls after they'd arrived at a small mountain valley not too far off in the distance. The old priest gave his instructions and the forest trolls roared out his order. More than 10 forest trolls stood at a high vantage point and threw down boulders, instantly blockading off the mountain valley and blocking off the dark elves. When Han Shao eavesdropped on the dark elf matriarch Dana's words earlier, he knew that Dana had long since made preparations locations in the surrounding valley. She'd prepared large amounts of boulders and had intended on evacuating the Dark Elves to the area after enraging the Dark Dragon, leaving the forest trolls to face the Dark Dragon. They'd then emerge after the battle and eradicate the surviving side. In this way, whether it was the Dark Dragon or the forest trolls, neither of them would escape the Dark Elves' grasp. If Dana's marvelous plan had been deployed according to her ideas, then Han Shao and the forest trolls would likely not have left this place alive. It was a good thing that Han Shao's hearing was extraordinary and caught every detail of Dana's vicious plan. This allowed the forest trolls to be one step ahead and hurry to the mountain valley before Dana and the others could react. They then used the stones that the Dark Elves had prepared to seal off the valley. "What do you mean by this?" Dana finally revealed, panic as she shrieked at Han Shao and the old priest from the other side of the stone wall. "Nothing much, just that I've discovered this Dark Dragon is simply too hard to handle. I'm canceling our deal earlier. We don't intend on continuing this battle. I'll be sure to return the 2 carts of gold and jewels after you take out the Dark Dragon, and I'll compensate you for your losses as well. My deepest apologies." Han Shao shrugged and spoke quite sincerely to Dana. Dana had never thought that Han Shao would deceive her at the most crucial moment. Although Han Shao was apologizing with a sincere face, his eyes were sinister and cold, obviously bearing ill will towards her. How could Dana be blind to it? When she thought about what she'd planned earlier, she felt her hands and feet grow cold and a huge headache throb at her temples. She was so anxious that she didn't know what to do. Lowly, cowardly lives received the rage of the mighty Gilbert. Dark Dragon Gilbert roared and sprayed acidic poison from his mouth. More than 10 Dark Elves couldn't dodge in time and emitted hideous screams after being covered by the acidic liquid. "To hell with him!" a handsome elf roared angrily as the exquisitely carved longbow in his hand suddenly expanded as if sucking in something. His originally slender body seemed to be sucked in by the bow as he started shrinking rapidly. "No!" Dana cried out loudly, her expression a bit frantic. "Hurry and give the order, otherwise my sacrifice will have been in vain." The male Dark Elf howled as his body became stick thin. His life surged into the strange bow as the bow flared out a faint dark light, looking quite evil and strange. Han Shao looked at the bow with astonishment, revealing a very curious look. After the bow sucked in the Dark Elf's life, an arrow with inky black light circling around it formed magically on the bow. As the Dark Elf's body dried out, the arrow started emanating a dangerous aura. Even the cocky Dark Dragon felt danger at this moment. He started his charge, sending out streams of blazing flame. The back of the mountain valley had been blocked off by Han Shao's orders, so the Dark Elves could only face the Dark Dragon's attacks and had no avenue of retreat at all. Since things had progressed to this point, Dana had no choice left available to her. She grit her teeth and gave the order. A few Dark Elves threw themselves in front of the elf with the bow without hesitation, rapidly deploying all sorts of elven magic to help him defend against Gilbert's attacks. In the span of a moment, more than 10 Dark Elves were engulfed by the Dark Dragon's flames that had lava mixed in and turned into a crisp in the blink of an eye. A ghastly wail sounded at this moment as the arrow finally swallowed all of the Dark Elf's life and shot out towards the Dark Dragon. Unfathomably swift, Gilbert had no chance to evade the mysterious arrow. The strange arrow formed by the black light abruptly metamorphosed into a black cloud as it drew closer to Gilbert, eventually completely enveloping him. A string of crackles exploded from the cloud of black light, intermixed with Gilbert's pain screams. It looked like the Dark Dragon was enduring an inhumane amount of pain, but as a super rank magical creature, the Dark Dragon still spewed out flames and poisonous liquid when assaulted by such pain. His body even landed amidst the Dark Elves from the air as the black cloud enveloped him, his claws tearing all the nearby Dark Elves to pieces. Even more Dark Elves died in a sickening fashion beneath the attacks of the flames and the poisonous liquid. Another 100 Dark Elves perished after a few breaths. There were less than 100 out of the original 300 Dark Elves. When the cloud of dark light dispersed and the Dark Dragon's body once again revealed itself, Han Shao discovered blood running down the Dark Dragon in multiple places. Even Gilbert's flesh and skin were charred and burned. His movements weren't as agile as before and both his eyes were injured. He moved around blindly like he couldn't see anything. "Prepare yourselves, we're going to be dragon slayers very soon." Han Shao smiled sinisterly at the old priest behind him as he gave the order. Chapter 145, Capturing the lewd dragon killed that dimmed dark dragon. The dark elf matriarch Dana no longer possessed her previous beauty and demeanor as she screamed with her hair wildly strewn all over the place. Due to the dark dragon's random rampaging, the dark elves scattered and dodged in all directions, occasionally running into the dark dragon's poisonous bouts of flame. Even though Dana had the protection of the dark elves, she still appeared quite bedraggled. Under Dana's instructions, the remaining dark elves started attacking the almost blind dark dragon. All sorts of arrows and magic struck the dark dragon's body, further worsening his injuries. As an advanced rank magical creature, the strength of the dark dragon was beyond all doubt. Even with 300 dark elves, if it hadn't been for the male dark elf sacrificing his life to activate that strange bow, it was likely that they would have been unable to harm the dark dragon. But up to now, because the dark dragon had already been gravely injured to the point where his eyes could no longer see, his large body had become a living target. As injuries racked his body, his speed became slower and his attacks weren't as powerful as before. The dark elves in the back were pushed up against the rock wall that Han Shao and the others were standing behind. When Han Shao saw that the dark dragon was about to die, as he observed everything, he immediately nodded at the old priest. "Obliterate the stone wall, we'll go in and clean up." Han Shao laughed sinisterly and gave instructions to the old priest. The forest troll warriors were ready after the old priest conveyed Han Shao's instructions and immediately started moving the boulders away. The dark elves had long since made their preparations to clean up afterwards and dug a sloping pit not too far in the distance. The forest troll warriors only needed to exert a little bit of strength to turn the thick logs that the dark elves had prepared. The boulders rolled at a slope and surged into the deep pit in the back. When all the boulders in the mountain valley had rolled into the deep pit, the passageway was finally opened again. Han Shao swept the scene with a cold gaze and waved his hand, telling the forest troll to charge. The forest troll's hunters in the back row hurled out spears and javelins with their thin arms, and the weapons whistled as they landed amongst the dark elves. Although the dark elves had been prepared for an attack, they still cried out with multiple howls of agony as the multitude of spears and javelins rained down. Scores of dark elves were nailed dead beneath this wave of attack. The matriarch of the dark elves was so incensed that she wanted to leap over and fight Han Shao to the death. "Matriarch, let's retreat." A female dark elf elder cried out loudly. "Shameless forest trolls, I'll settle this with you sooner or later." Dana's shrill voice bawled out loudly. She then turned desolately and gave the order, "Retreat, everyone retreat." The dark elves who hadn't died yet all ran for their lives under Dana's orders. Even Dana swiftly left under the cover of some experts. If roots weren't fully removed, they'd reappear again when the spring wind blew. Since they'd erupted in full-blown hostility, Han Shao naturally hardened his heart and spoke coldly to the priest after them, "Exterminate them all." The forest troll chief gave the order to attack, and the forest troll warriors came howling out of the mountain valley, giving chase to the remaining dark elves. Han Shao targeted one of the dark elves and gave the little skeleton the order to kill. Wielding the bone dagger, the little skeleton was as fast as lightning as it swept past the hordes of forest trolls, speeding towards the dark elf with the strange bow. The male elf had expended his life earlier to activate the strange bow into shooting a frighteningly powerful arrow, riddling the dark dragon's body full of injuries. Han Shao was exceedingly curious about that strange bow, so he'd kept his eye on it all along. When the dark elf who'd used up his life had died, the bow was grasped by another dark elf. Han Shao had the little skeleton chase him because he wanted to obtain the bow in the elf's hands. Gilbert roared out raspily as its enormous body rolled, creating thundering sounds as he thrashed around on the ground. The forest trolls around him hastily avoided the dragon when they saw that he was moving around again. Even when heavily injured, the strength of an advanced magical creature was still very frightening. The forest trolls had already seen him terrorize the dark elves, so they were deathly afraid of the dark dragon's enormous strength to the point of being unwilling to let up their guard. Even now, the dark dragon's body thrashed as it slowly moved towards the swamp. It looked like it would attempt to flee back to its old nest at all costs now. Seeing that the dark dragon wanted to flee and casting a look at the dark elves escaping in all directions, Han Shao immediately roared at the old priest, "Split half of our force to handle the dark dragon and have the rest chase after the dark elves. Those chasing the dark elves shouldn't go too far. Even if they can't kill all the Dark Elves they should return in a short amount of time. The old priest made a simple hand gesture and half of the forest trolls who'd all been ready to chase after the Dark Elves automatically split off with the remaining half attacking the Dark Dragon. The forest trolls had more than twice the amount of numbers compared to the Dark Elves. Once 200 trolls joined forces in attacking the Dark Dragon, it was unable to escape after a mere second. Wah wah. That hurts, don't hit me. Don't hit me, I surrender. The Dark Dragon Gilbert cried out loudly as his large body slowly began to shrink beneath the circling black lights. Han Sha-Oh started. He hadn't expected that the Dark Dragon would actually beg for mercy. He laughed uproariously as he lifted a hand indicating for the forest trolls to cease their attacks, intent on seeing what the Dark Dragon wanted. When the forest trolls had surrounded the Dark Dragon in the center, the Dark Dragon's body continued to shrink beneath the circulating black lights, slowly transforming into a humanoid form. A tall, slender young man with burnt skin, smoke coming out of his head and traces of blood around his eyes appeared. He grimaced and cried out with pain, continuously begging for mercy. I surrender, I surrender. Casting a glance at the old priest and all weapons leveled at this young man, Han Sha-Oh grasped the Demon Slayer edge and slowly walked in front of the young man. There's no use in surrendering. There are many valuable things on you. Your dragon crystal, dragon meridians, and dragon horns are all priceless treasures. I can obtain them all if I kill you. Do you think your surrender is of any use? Dark Dragon Gilbert immediately raised both hands and called out, no, no, my most valuable things aren't on me. I can belong to you and form a master and slave contract with you as long you give me beauties and treasure and keep me by your side. Han Sha-Oh immediately paused when this suggestion was raised, and thoughts spun madly through his mind, weighing up the possibilities of this suggestion. Don't hesitate, think about it. If I become your servant, I can help you kill people, burn things, and fly everywhere and take out your enemies. As my master, you only need to give me treasure and beauties to enjoy. What a good business deal this is. The young Dark Dragon called out loudly as if deathly afraid that Han Sha-Oh wouldn't agree. He then added on, I can compromise if you don't have treasure, but I must have beauties to sleep with or I won't do it. Han Sha-Oh didn't know whether to laugh or cry as he looked at the shameless and cowardly Dark Dragon. He stood there not knowing what to do. The old priest suddenly walked over to Han Sha-Oh and hurried him, liaison, hurry and agree. He'll be an absolutely loyal servant if he forms a contract with you. Lewd Dragon, why must you have beauties? Han Sha-Oh stared at Gilbert and asked, amused. The latter was covered in burns and blood and looked like he would die at any time, but still roared loudly for beauties. I don't know, I really don't know. That's what my daddy told me when I was born. Us noble dark dragons must have plenty of treasure and beauties to win respect from other dark dragons. Beauties are our goal. Gilbert's black hands kept rubbing his eyes as he answered loudly. Is this your first time away from home? Han Sha-Oh stared at him and asked once again. How did you know that it's my first time away from home? Gilbert started as turned towards Han Sha-Oh's voice. This lewd dragon was actually quite silly. Han Sha-Oh contemplated silently and then opened his mouth. All right, I accept your request. You and I will immediately form a master and servant contract, otherwise I'll immediately kill you. Master, I'm your servant now, will you find beauties for me? The lewd dragon Gilbert cried out and pleaded. Han Sha-Oh, I haven't found any for myself yet, you wait there on the sidelines. Han Sha-Oh said nonchalantly.